Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you, Martha and Nicole. I've attended a good many of these when the center rolled these out, and I think it's a really great opportunity. For the rest of them have been. I don't know if the jury will be out on this one, but I really appreciate all the hard work that Martha and her team have put in to transitioning these things, and for those of us that have to keep track of PDHs, they've been a real good opportunity for that as well. So. Uh, we've got a lot of ground to cover this morning. This one is preparing for winter weather. I think it's timely for those of you in the local system and even in the state system, that may be trying to get transition. I know a lot of us are running behind on projects with some of the shutdown earlier in the year and rushing kind of to the end. So I think now is a good time to go through these things. And I'll tell you that there's an awful lot to cover. Martha mentioned that I teach the snow and ice class with the legendary Carl Wells, who's been at this, I guess, now for 20 some years, right, Martha? Thankful to teach it with him. A whole lot of the elements in this presentation come from the basis of the snow and ice training class. So this is kind of a little bit of a crash course. I'm sure for most of you on the call, a lot of these will be just really good reminders, things that you've seen, you've got handled. Hopefully there are some takeaways like, you know what, I better get on that. You know what, I need to be planning for that when we're all finished. So in a nutshell, today, I want to boil down winter preparation into kind of four categories. It's personnel, equipment, environment, and facilities. So I know the center is really big on acronyms, and so I tried my best to come up with one that would stick with the group. And I think based on people that I've seen here on the call, that the best I could come up with was tied to a campaign. I guess it started in the early '90s. I didn't realize it had gone on that long, but was later championed by Sam Elliott. So here's what I've got for you guys. All right, personnel, equipment, environment, facilities. PEEF, it's what's for winter. All right, let's roll on. Personnel considerations. So that's my team. That was a picture of us last year. Our snow and ice team in Kenton County. It includes our public works, all of our public works folks, two folks out of our parks department. At the local level. For those of you at the local level, we're not always fully staffed in our public works departments, our public services departments, to fully handle snow and ice operations. So we've got outside departments that help us out. It's a little different than KYTC. For the most part, at the cabinet, you're staffed with PD&P staff, and for the most part, that's preservation staff, maintenance staff. But we also, also as part of that rugged looking group there, we've got our shop technicians, so the guys that work on the trucks, and I'm fortunate. Truly, I inherited a good team from my predecessor, and I think we've worked to build that team. But when we talk about personnel, there are some really big items, right, that we've got to cover. And for our department, it's becoming more and more important that we take time to cover things like driver training, policies, procedures, route familiarization, because we're in the middle of a transition, right? We've got some veterans, as you can see in that group. We got some people that have been plowing snow for 20 years, and then I've got folks that have never sat in the dump truck, but they were the most qualified candidate, and that's we've hired them on to work. So now, as we're transitioning from tier one, we're through tier, we're past the tier two window. We're transitioning from tier one to tier three employees, and particularly in our area where the job market is strong. We're not necessarily hiring people that have a ton of equipment experience, right? We're not necessarily hiring people off of the farm, people that have been on a tractor, people that have been around a truck, people that are familiar with heavy equipment. So I would argue with you that particularly in the more urbanized areas of the state, one of the most important things we can do for snow and ice is take a little time and train our people, right? Take a little time and put our new guys in a truck with a veteran and give them the opportunity to just take that ride, right? And let them get educated on some of the pitfalls of plowing and treating. So, again, there are some highlights, and I won't go into each one of these in a whole lot of depth, but one of the things I like to hammer home on policies and procedures, obviously we need people to be responsible, right? We need people to be responsive. We need, when the snow starts to fall or before the snow starts to fall and we make phone calls or we send texts, we need people to be responsive. We need to communicate how important that is. One of the things that we say in our snow and ice class is just how thankful I personally am for our police, our EMS services, our firefighters. I'm so thankful that we've got groups of people all over the Commonwealth and nation that want to do that job. I'm so thankful. But in Kentucky, for about 6 months out of the year, if the group that you see there isn't doing their job, then it's almost impossible for the group I just mentioned to do their job, right? If we don't have people plowing snow, treating roads, then our emergency services folks can't get there. So part of our driver training program needs to be to communicate just how important their job is and how much we rely on them. And by extension, communicate policies that really matter. Like, you can't be drinking, you can't be doing drugs, you can't, all these things, but some recognition that this time of year holds most of the holidays for public calendars, right? If you've got whatever it is, with the cabinet, with the local agency, you've got 11 or 12 holidays probably a year. At least half of those fall in the same window as snow and ice fighting season. So we recognize that people are going to be, they're going to be in situations where there are festivities, where they might want to have a drink, where they might want to, celebrate some. I think the key takeaway, the key communication to your people, to your staff, to you as a driver is just be responsible about it. At this point, we've all got a smartphone, we've got a device, we know what weather's coming for the most part. Be responsible about it and know that your job is more than just you. The people of your county, city depend on you to show up. So just keep that sort of thing in mind. A hit on route familiarization. A lot changes in a year, right? You may have had your snow and ice route last year and you're familiar with it. You don't need to drive it again. You know where the bridges are, you know where the railroad tracks are, you know where the branches are. And that may be true, but over the course of a year in Kentucky, bridge ends settle, right? So does that change your plowing? Does that change your approach? In the course of a year in Kentucky, trees grow, branches, limbs get into the road, smack mirrors. Does that change your approach? Over the course of a year, new houses, new development comes in and gives you overhead wires across the road. If you've got a tailgate sander, tailgate spreader, does that change your approach? Do you need to know where those are? You do. So take that time to get your people out on the road, and think about opportunities where you can do it. Right now, it's nice and sunny. Again, the world hadn't swallowed us up just yet. So is today a good day to get out? Maybe today is the day to finish up some of your projects, but take time to get your team familiarized with their routes. I think in the interest of time, we'll keep rolling. So here's a question, and I'm gonna pull up the chat box and try to squeeze some answers out of you guys. When's the best time to allow drivers to become familiar with their routes? And Nicole, I know you asked me early on if I needed to get poll questions up, and at the time I didn't have them. So I absolutely appreciate the ask, and we may transition some of these on future presentations.
So just put yourself off mute and Let's talk about when's the best time to become familiar with your routes. Or you put something during the chat pod. Matthew Martin says during good weather is when you should become familiar.
Good. During good weather. Anybody else?
Year round.
Year round. Sure. Sure. Yeah, there's not one right answer. Both of the answers that I've gotten before the first event, yep, all three of these answers. Before bad weather, absolutely. You guys are on it. I've got a few answers that I'm going to go through as well. Before the first snow and ice event of the season, that's a great time. As early and often as possible, which is what Tim said. During fall rain events. So let's talk about this one for a second. Why is a rain event a good reason, a good time to send drivers out?
Usually not a whole lot else going on during rain.
Yep. I'd say that's half of the answer that I'm looking for, and I absolutely agree with that. Limits other outdoor projects. That's good. But what's the other thing we notice when it's raining that affects snow and ice operations? Randy got it. Yep. Randy and Matt, you see where the water's ponding, right? You see drainage issues. If you've got a failed ditch, and and I'm calling a failed ditch a ditch that's closed in or hadn't been dipped out appropriately, you see water running across the road. Well, for those of us that have been in the business, where you've got water running across the road in the fall, you got an icy spot in the winter, right? So aside from it not being a very productive time for our crews, normally when it's raining, it's also a good opportunity to go out and find out where you've got water ponding, where you've got maybe clogged entrance pipes or cross culverts. And it gives you an opportunity to get those programmed for some repair, remediation, and get rolling. So, all right. And the last one, and the one that I try to hammer home, not only in this event, but in snow and ice class, is that the best time to do a lot of these things is right now. Right now. It's not snowing. We're ahead of the game. Let's plan accordingly, and let's get on these things now. All right, let's move on into equipment considerations. This is one we'll probably spend the most time on, and I would appreciate your feedback when I haven't covered things that I need to be covering, or if I'm spending too much time on one thing or the other, let me know. But our equipment is at the heart of our snow and ice program in Kentucky. Arguably at the heart of all snow and ice programs. Then we've come an awful long way, on particularly at the state level on our equipment. Some of the new gadgets and gizmos we've got, some of the improvements we've made to trucks have come a long way. But the basic principles, the things that we need to be reviewing and looking at, haven't changed a whole awful lot, right? So we need to be checking tires, and I ask in all of our snow and ice classes, which president can help you check your tires? Anybody? Any feedback? Lincoln can help you with your tires, absolutely. So at this point, I'd say most everybody on the call knows you can flip a penny upside down. If you can see Lincoln's head over that tread, it's time to schedule for some tire replacement, right? It's time to schedule to get those tires improved, updated, upgraded. Check sidewalls, right? We want to check seals. Don't forget about your inside duals. Take time to inspect that truck. If you've got questions, concerns, get those tires written up and get them into your shop. We need to spend some time checking the hydraulic system, right? Carl Wells has an awesome story about an operator in a northern Kentucky county, not Kenton County for the record, who went to check his truck and went to a supervisor, and he said, I need 5 gallons of hydraulic fluid. And so shop gave him 5 gallons of hydraulic fluid. And he came back 15 minutes later and he said, I need some stay dry. I said, what'd you do? And he said, well, when I put the bed down, I put the plow down, hydraulic fluid went everywhere, right? So the takeaway is we're always checking our hydraulic systems with our cylinders retracted, right? We're checking them with the plows down, with the beds down. And again, this may be old hat to everybody on the call, but we've got a new generation coming in, and we've got to take some time. We've got to take some time to get them up to speed. What else do we need to be checking on our hydraulic system? Hoses, right? And at this point, we've got an awful lot of them. We've got a couple of hoses going to the spinner. We've got a couple of hoses going to the auger, on a dump bed sander. We've got hoses going to the plow. Likely, if you're with the cabinet, you've got hoses going to your pre-wet system. So you've got an awful lot of rubber that can be failing. We've got seals that can be failing. If you've got a truck in your system, or the truck that you're using to plow has a cylinder that's bleeding off, right? You're losing fluid slowly. That's obviously not a favorable thing to have your plow start smacking the ground, a few miles in if you haven't lowered it. The takeaway is get those things inspected, get them written up and scheduled for repair. Lights, which of your lights are most important, right? All of them. DOT would tell you that if you got a light on the truck, it needs to be working. But the big takeaway here, you see most of your lights, or your folks in the shop will see most of your lights on. It's really easy to let lights be the last thing you worry about until you get called in at 3 a.m. for a snow, right? And you get out on the road and you recognize that your spreader light is pointing at the rear inside dual, or it's pointing across the center line, and you don't have any idea what's going on at the spreader. So it's just kind of a reminder that we need to be taking a few minutes, finding either coming in early, which now might be a little harder, or just staying a few minutes later, get into a darker condition and check our lights, plow lights, spreader lights, etc. Just take that time. Toolboxes, supplies. What do we need? The takeaway for supplies is it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. And we want to be preparing for the worst, hoping for the best. Always use the scenario that you're out in the rural part of your county and it's 3 a.m. You don't have cell signal, you don't have radio signal. The truck slides off into a ditch and dies, right? What do you want? What do you need in that scenario? If it could be an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours before somebody can get to you. Have gloves, have blankets, backup clothing. Obviously, you want to have probably a few snacks. You can probably do without the snacks, but you need some water. Just be prepared for the worst situation and hope for the very best. Moving into plow condition and mounting. Again, a good reminder, just be safety conscious when we're mounting plows. I think we've been very fortunate the last couple of winters in Kentucky that I think maybe we hung a plow in Kenton County twice last year, and it was probably marginal then. Hopefully we don't hang a plow at all. Hopefully this hour is the biggest wasted hour you have all season, right? I hope we don't have any snow at all. But when we think about it, just be safety conscious. There needs to be 2 people mounting a plow. Block it up. Keep your safety front and center during operations. And then on plow condition, we asked this question quite a bit in snow and ice. When do we change our cutting edges? How much is left on our cutting edges when we plan to get them changed? Anybody? Not everybody at once now. So the feedback we get, eighth inch. Okay. Anybody else? All right. I'll roll on. So the kind of rule of thumb that we hear out of shops, I hear it out of our shops, is 2 fingers, right? And when you've got 2 fingers below the mold board, and I tell you that just depends on your fingers, right? If you've got if you got pretty good fingers, that's probably right. Our general guidance is 2 inches, right? If you're in if you've got 2 inches or less of your cutting edge below the mold board, that's when you need to be planning to replace that cutting edge, so you don't have to wind up coming back in during an active event and having downtime to replace an edge. So inspect those things. Again, the takeaway here is right now is the best time to do that. Cutting edges aren't going to change between now and the first event. So to inspect them. And if you've got less than 2 inches, get them replaced. V-box mounting condition, V-box condition and mounting. So the kind of the takeaway items on your V-box are, if you've got a chain driven V-box, is the oiler full? Is the chain in good condition? We don't want to find out again in the middle of a storm with a V-box full of salt that the chain is broken because it was dang near rusted through before the season started, and now you've got 4 or 5 or 6 tons that you've got to figure out how you're going to get out of the bed. Right, now's the time. Let's take a look at those chains, take a look at those augers. We're fortunate enough to have been able to purchase a new auger driven V-box. It seems to be a great unit, but we need to be inspecting those things now and making sure they're in good condition. And a reminder to your new drivers with V-boxes that when we start to load a V-box, we're shifting our center of gravity, right? Just by the geometry of a V-box, as we put more weight, put more material in those things, we're shifting our center of gravity and make it considerably higher. So again, those are just reminders for your drivers. Under the hood, I won't bore you to death with all the items that need to be checked under the hood. With a general service, make sure that all those items are being checked. Again, right now is the perfect time to find out that you've got a serpentine belt that has lots of cracks and missing material. Now's the time to find that. Now's the time to replace it. Same thing with hoses, air filters, cabin air filters. Take the time now to get ahead of that and get that scheduled. All right, I'm going to roll on into some questions. This one's a really tough one. When should known equipment deficiencies be scheduled for repair? Now. That team from Maysville's on it. Anybody else? As soon as they're identified. Yep. Before using it. Good. All good answers, team. Thank you. So before the first snow and ice event of the season, it's an acceptable answer. Everything that you guys gave me were acceptable answers. Again, the takeaway is right now. Before the snow starts flying, let's get that stuff scheduled now. Let's not be in the middle of pointing fingers later on with who should have changed it or who shouldn't have changed it, who should have written it up. Let's do it now. So just a few images. It's crazy some of the things you can find when you Google, plow deficiencies and that sort of thing. I've got a plow light out here, bald tires, a failed hydraulic hose. Have any of your departments, any of your divisions transitioned to LED lights, LED plow lights? Just kind of a question for the group.
We'll give them a minute to write something in the box. Those tires are scary.
Yeah. Budget tires.
Oh.
Some. Okay. So we had
In there, they're good tires.
What's that? Those are good. Those are good wagon tires. Those are hay wagon tires right there. Um, so we had a little learning curve with the LED lights. We got a new truck in the fall of 16, and driver took it out, and I had to hang a plow, right, and came back in and said, I can't see a thing. My lights are snow covered. Well, what's going on with LED lights that doesn't go on with halogen or incandescent type bulbs? What's going on? Why were they covered?
Not as much heat produced as the other ones.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Those LED lights don't produce enough heat to melt the snow off of them. So you've got an active snow event. You've got pack on those lights. We actually had to put the little heater elements on those. Since then, we've ordered the trucks with the LED lights with the heated kits on them. But yeah, absolutely good feedback. Before we roll out of equipment, anything that I missed, anything that we need to cover that you guys are like, I can't believe you didn't bring this up?
Fuel treatment.
Fuel treatment, absolutely. And actually, we've got bulk tanks at our shop, and have a group that puts fuel treatment in the tank. It's in our bulk tanks, the 8,000 gallon tank itself. But yes, to keep some anti-gel type treatment, always good move. All right, let's roll on. Environmental considerations. So again, everyone I know at the district level or at the cabinet has ground speed control. For those of you in the local system that have it, I would tell you that, we can go into the meat and potatoes of environmental impacts and what we need to be doing to make changes and how we can be protecting our environment. And it's super important. It is. But I would tell you the biggest splash that we can have from a system level is to have our trucks calibrated appropriately, right? We want to put out 500 pounds per centerline mile, or 800 pounds or 300 pounds, whatever it is. All of that is a pipe dream if our trucks aren't appropriately calibrated. And in our big program, in our big snow and ice presentation, we've got some data that shows that if statewide, if KYTC's trucks were not calibrated to the tune of 5%, if they were off by 5%, you could basically waste enough money that you could pave 10 miles of rural road in Kentucky, right? If all trucks were off by 5% on calibration, you'd waste enough salt that the money you could have saved would pave 10 miles of rural road. If they're off by 10%, double that, right? 20 miles of rural road is nothing to sneeze at in our systems, right? We've got asphalt, the way Carl likens it is, we've got asphalt that lasts you 10, 12, 14 years. It's scheduled to last you 20 years, but most of it in Kentucky doesn't. But you've got salt that lasts you an hour, right? Maybe 2 hours. Let's do what we can from a programmatic standpoint and calibrate our trucks in such a way that we've got good material control and we're not over applying on our roads. We just wrapped up our calibration at the county level last week, and it should always be straightforward. It should be, we're going to turn our controller on and we're going to run out on simulated speed for a minute and see if we run out the amount that we expect, whether it's 100 pounds or 200 pounds. But invariably, we've always got trucks with issues, whether they're auger sensors or we've got cable issues. Maybe the pulses are off in the controller, whatever the case. And it always winds up taking longer than we expect. But again, it is a very, very good exercise each and every year to get those trucks calibrated. So I would tell you that, particularly in a local system, if you don't have ground speed control, I would highly recommend that you get there. There's an awful lot of benefits. I would tell you that in a short period, they pay for themselves. But even if you don't have ground speed controllers, you can calibrate to some extent your trucks with the output that you have from the spinner. So when we talk about environment, calibration is critical, right? And then again, moving into the meat and potatoes, controlling our chloride runoff is the name of the game. The roadway runoff, that's handled by your calibration, that's handled by your ground speed control. But be aware of where your equipment wash areas are. The output is eventually going to on state lots, KYTC's lots. When you wash your equipment, it should all be running to a retention pond on the lot. The retention pond settles out, and the whole idea is that we're not putting excess chloride materials into our environment. Some of our local lots leave a lot to be desired in terms of our wash areas and runoff. I would tell you that you can't, and you guys know this, those of you in the local system know this, you can't tackle everything every year. You can't ever get everything done that you want to. I think everybody recognizes that. The Division of Water recognizes that. But I think it's a very worthy endeavor to schedule construction of a detention pond and get it on the books to help that chloride runoff. Again, to catch, if your lot is designed appropriately, you'll be catching equipment wash areas, any of your storage areas. You'll always wind up with some material outside of the storage area, despite best efforts, that gets washed off with a rain event. So get that scheduled if you don't have one, to get a detention basin constructed. And then just good housekeeping things, right? Clean up after storm events. When we've got people that have been driving for 12 and 14 hours, 16 hours in some events, they come in, they're wiped out, right? They're done. They're ready to go home. They're ready to get some sleep. And I recognize just how important that is. People don't want to spend that extra 20 or 30 minutes unloading their truck and having to clean up and sit around and wait on the loader operator to push the material back in. I get it. I absolutely get it. But I tell you, it's one of the most responsible parts of the operation, right? So take that extra time. If you're a driver, take that extra time. Avoid those heavy end of shift treatments, and kind of respect the lot, respect your environment. Take that time to clean up the loading area when the storm is over. All right. Let's roll into another question. So I didn't cover this directly, but let's see what the group has to say. Last year in Kentucky, which item was more expensive on average, asphalt surface or rock salt? Tim says salt. Ray says salt. Randy says salt. All right. Dennis says salt. Gosh, you guys are good. Last year, rock salt was more expensive. Statewide average cost was $90.75 a ton. I went to average unit bid prices for 2019 from construction procurement, and class 2 surface had an average cost in Kentucky of $78.95 per ton. So, when we're out pothole patching or when we're paving, Tim, I know you said you guys were going to be milling today. Well, there's always an asphalt operation that follows a milling operation, right? We're always cognizant. We're always aware of asphalt waste and making sure that, if proposal calls for 1.5 inches, that we're getting an average of 1.5 inches, and we watch that really closely. The takeaway from this slide, the message to you guys is that we need to be as cognizant and aware of the amount of salt that we're putting down. I mean, think of this differently. If the plants were open, we could go to asphalt plants with our plow trucks every event, and load up with asphalt and go sling it through a tailgate spreader at a huge discount compared to slinging salt, right? And again, I know that's a ridiculous example. We're not going to go slinging asphalt through a spreader, but we're talking about a $12 a ton delta here. And so every ton that we can save is money in the bank that the cabinet or your local agency can put toward resurfacing programs or other worthy programs. The flip side is, and the takeaway, here is, we're not suggesting to you to cut it to the bone. Dwayne doesn't have the option in Boyle County not to treat roads. I'm sure it's unacceptable that you've got roads with snowpack for long periods of time. Dwayne's got a robust program. Dwayne, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I know in the past he's transitioned to green salt in January, February to be more effective. I'm not suggesting that we get to a point where we're so thin that we're not doing our job. That's ridiculous, right? I'm suggesting let's use what we need and not much more. And that's the takeaway. That's the takeaway from this slide. Good. All right, facilities considerations, and some of these go hand in hand with our environmental considerations. But there's a handful of pictures on here that we'll kind of discuss and go through. But when we talk about facilities, what we're talking about are our storage facilities. I know in some counties still in Kentucky, we have counties, cities that are not using chloride material. They're not using rock salt. We still have some counties and cities that are using abrasives. And that's okay, right? Abrasives are considerably cheaper than rock salt. But storage of all these materials is critical. We don't want nor need runoff of the materials because it's lost. It's literally money just running off our lot. But storing them appropriately in a way that doesn't damage our facilities is just as important. And the picture that you see on the top right, where we've got salt stacked above our knee walls, not good, right? We need to be below the knee walls on these. A lot of our new facilities, a lot of the new facilities being constructed in Kentucky are these clear span type facilities, like this bottom left-hand picture, for easy access. And I think maintenance, we're headed that way. Principles are all still the same though, right? We need to be keeping salt below the top of the knee wall. We're not going to be stacking salt into the hoop barn part. Things that I think for this group are pretty well no-brainers, right? But we've got to communicate these things with new staff and staff that are going to be handling these things as the salt rolls in. So those are the takeaways. On facilities, I did want to touch on procurement options. I think most of you I hope most of you have your domes full or have your storage facilities full. But just a note on procurement options, Kenton County participates every year in the reverse auction. So NACO has a reverse salt auction every year where suppliers, Morton, Cargill, Compass, all these suppliers will get on and basically reverse bid, right? Kenton County will say, we want 16,000 tons for the county and our cities. And these suppliers will bid against one another to get that low bid. Rarely do we wind up taking that low bid. We'll put our own bid out, our own bid docs out separately. And most of the time that turns out to be the bid that we take. But just a note that you've got some options there in your local district. If you're with a local agency, your district may have some material sharing, cost sharing options for you as well. How many of you on the call, just kind of a question for the group, how many of you are using liquids, whether it's brine, sodium chloride, or calcium chloride? Let me ask that differently. is there anyone not using liquids? All right, Mason County's not using liquids. Randy says you're using brine. Dennis not using. Okay, that's really good feedback, folks, and I appreciate you participating. So, to those of you that aren't using it, again, we're not going to change everything in a year. We're not going to change everything in a few months. I would suggest that you consider your liquid options moving forward. Liquids have an awful lot of benefits. If we pre-treat our rock salt with either brine or calcium chloride, depending on pavement temperature, we get ahead of the storm with bounce, right? So if you're treating with pre-treated material, we don't get near as much bounce off of the spinner, which means we get material where we want it. And rock salt needs water in order to go into solution, right? So we get a head start on the solution there. If you've got brine material, Randy's group, I would assume if you're pre-treating your salt at the spinner with brine, you're getting the benefit. You also have the benefit if you're generating brine of anti-icing, right? Where we go out in advance of the storm and give the agency that fuse. So for those of you that do have it, though, as it relates to facilities, these tanks need to be monitored. They have a lifespan. They've got, I think the cabinet is now on an 8-year replacement cycle for their brine and their calcium chloride tanks, because they will fail, just like everything else. At some point they will fail. So you need to be monitoring those and getting them on a replacement schedule. Maybe most importantly, having an appropriately sized containment unit around them. So you see where my cursor is. I don't have the dimensions, so I clearly haven't done the calculations, but that appears to be an appropriately sized containment unit in case you have a rupture of a tank, right? Most of these containment units they all should have some form of a bleeder on them. So here's a PVC pipe that is at the bottom of the containment. That is installed to bleed off rainwater, right? Stormwater. Don't leave and impress upon your staff. Don't leave these caps off, and don't leave them unattended. The entire reason for containment is if we have a tank fail, rupture, burst, something crazy, that we've got a contained area to hold those chloride materials. If the cap is off, we're not holding them, right? We're putting a whole lot of nasty concentrated chlorides out into our lot. So just impress upon your folks to make sure that we're paying as much attention to our liquid chloride storage as we are our rock salt. So, all right. Facilities considerations. Here's another question. And we're getting to the end of the PEEF, by the way, guys. So traditional salt domes should be loaded above their concrete knee walls to maximize storage capacity. Is that true or false? Yeah, looks like almost the whole team says false. That is correct. The answer is false. Most traditional domes are made of 2x4 treated lumber with galvanized connectors, which makes them resistant, but they are not designed for lateral loads. And over time, if you bury, even those galvanized fasteners will wear thin and start to fail. So good feedback. Thank you everyone for participating. Again, these are takeaways that are good reminders this time of year to share with your team. All right, so as promised, we're going to talk just a couple of minutes about the impact of the coronavirus on our facilities, the coronavirus on our operation. And that my leadoff slide here shows a donkey and an elephant in a car, right? To talk about your political views as they relate to the virus. At this point, no doubt, in America, in Kentucky, probably in every county and city, people everywhere have an opinion about the virus, whatever it might be. Oftentimes, those opinions are directly tied to what your political views may be on the subject. This slide and the next few slides are just simply to say that regardless of your political views, there are some things that we need to be doing just from an operational standpoint, in terms of CDC guidance, local health code guidance, to keep our people safe. And the slide here is a reminder that we need to keep our politics in the car. I mean, the best place for our politics, I'd say by and large, and I say that from the seat I sit in most days to this seat, our politics need to stay in the car, and we need to do what's best for the operation and what's best for the taxpayer in terms of continuity, in terms of operations. And so just a reminder that the next few slides aren't intended to be politically motivated. They're not intended to be, we're not getting into the back and forth. We're just talking about things that are responsible from an operational standpoint this winter and maybe next, right? We don't really know. All right. So dealing with the Rona, we've got kind of two big camps, right? You've got your equipment, you've got equipment impacts, and you've got facilities impacts. And as equipment and vehicles go, Kenton County has implemented a vehicle policy that is, obviously, if you're in a vehicle by yourself, you don't have to wear a mask, right? So most plow truck drivers that I'm aware of in Kentucky operate independently. We don't have two people in a cab. You know, it's normally just one driver, one vehicle. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to force masks in that situation. There's no reason for them. Our policy at Kenton County is if a vehicle, whether it's a dump truck, pickup truck, crew cab, car, whatever, if a vehicle has more than one occupant, all occupants need to be wearing their mask. And I think that's a reasonable ask. The other thing that we've tried to implement as much as possible is when an operator is finished using a piece of equipment for the day, whether that's the loader, the skid steer, backhoe, dump truck, whatever it might be, if that vehicle isn't, or that piece of equipment isn't specifically assigned to that operator, and I can't think of any situation where only one operator operates this one thing, then we need to be taking sanitizing wipes and wiping down commonly touched surfaces, right? And is that good for coronavirus? That's what the research would say. But what else is it good for? It's probably good for intestinal parasites, right? It's probably good for flu virus and other things that give us fits. And again, this time of year, I think it's important that we're doing what we can to keep people healthy, because very few of you on the call have facilities that are overstaffed, right? I don't think anybody on the call would tell me that you got enough people to drive trucks and you got 10 people just waiting when your A team falls, you got 10 people on the B team waiting to drive. I don't think that's the case in most of our facilities. So anything we can do to be responsible and protect one another is recommended. Office and fleet shop suggestions, whether you're going into the garage to get things fixed, or you're going to the office to turn in paperwork, or you got questions, supervisors, whatever the case, they're not all that different. The only other reminder in this group is, the social distancing aspect, right? Like anything else, whether it's coronavirus, flu, uranium exposure, whatever it is, it's an exposure calculation. It's a period of time that you've got to be exposed to the substance or the virus before you can be infected or affected by it. So just good general guidance is to limit your time indoor in indoor facilities with people in your shops, in your offices, admin offices, without a mask on, right? So keep those masks on if you've got to be inside, and know this thing too will pass. This is what we've got to do this winter, and let's keep rolling. When we think about the trucks, though, and before I roll into the truck, people may be saying, well, sanitizing wipes, that sounds great, but man, those are expensive, and we're going to go through an awful lot of them. Yes, to both, but I would also tell you, I'm not aware of a county in Kentucky, and probably by extension a city in Kentucky, that doesn't have access to PPE, either through your emergency management, Homeland Security, or access to funding for that type of purpose, that type of use through the CARES Act. So I do recognize there's an investment, but number one, that investment should be covered by some emergency funding pot, or you can look at it like, well, if we don't make some provision to try to keep our drivers safe, what are the logical extremes? Logical extremes are, I could get 2, 3, 4 drivers sick, and again, whether it's the coronavirus, whether it's the flu, intestinal parasites, all the nasty things. And if I wind up 3 or 4 drivers down, what impact will that have on the safety of our community? So let's think about the type of things that we touch, though. Right? It's real. I think it's real easy to say, well, I'll wipe down the steering wheel and we'll call it good. But when you get into the cab of a truck, you touch everything, right? And so let's think about what those items are, what we really ought to be going over with a wipe at the end of our 12-hour or 16-hour shift. What should we be touching? Well, it's the steering wheel, and then it's the signal, and it's the keys, and then the mic, and then we touch all kinds of things in the cab. And this slide's just kind of a reminder. There's an awful lot of red there. This slide's just a reminder that as we're getting out of the trucks, let's just be aware of that. Shut the truck off, grab a wipe, take 2 minutes, wipe down steering wheels, wipe down parking brakes, radios, levers, plow controls, seat belts. The thing that this doesn't show, handles for inside and outside the door, right? We touch an awful lot of stuff when we get in our trucks. Take a minute. It's for you. It's for the driver that follows you. And truly at this point, it's for your organization, right? So just take that time at the end of the shift. One final note for the Rona, right? For the coronavirus, or again, if we'd never heard of the coronavirus, if we'd never heard of COVID-19, I would tell you that this slide is appropriate. Make contingency plans. You don't know what could happen. we could have a 1978 winter, right, where we've got super cold, lots of snow. We could have a 2009 ice storm event. We don't know. And I think it's appropriate for all agencies, the cabinet, counties, cities, to have contingency plans for every part of their personnel operation. You need them for snow and ice drivers and loaders. What happens if today you lose a driver, or in January you have 2 drivers get sick, and whatever that is, whether it's the Rona or a stomach bug? What are your plans to get their routes covered while they're out? And by the way, if it is the Rona, based on local guidance, they're out for 14 days, right? At minimum. What are your plans to have their routes covered? I'm not saying you've got to know it today. I'm just saying consider what you're going to do to transition if that happens. How are you going to get those routes covered? How are you going to make sure those folks are rested and have a plan to keep operations moving? Same thing for your technicians in the shop. Same thing for office staff, right? A lot of times we think, well, office staff, we can do with or without. Supervisors, we can definitely do without, right? We don't need those guys. But what is your operational plan if you have people that have to be out, whether it's taking care of themselves, taking care of family members? What is your contingency plan? Again, I don't make believe I understand how each of you operate, but you know how you operate. And by extension, you can take some time and come up with okay, if I have this scenario, here's my plan. If I have this scenario, here's my plan. Cross train where appropriate. If you can bring office staff in and get them trained in a loader to load materials or a backhoe to load materials, that's great, right? And I think the final note on this is, in your mind, you may have it planned, right? You may know, if Greg and Sam and Harold all get sick, I'm going to put Mark and Bill and Ed on their routes and double up. But yeah, Tim's got it, right? What happens if you get sick and it's all in your mind, right? Take a few minutes, write down your plan, write down your contingency plan, type it up, email it to your office manager, email it to your supervisor, email it to your crew leaders. Have a plan in place for contingency if we have the situation arise where we've got people that are sick. So that's all I've got, folks. I held you over by an extra minute, and I apologize there. I got to tell you, I really, really appreciate your feedback. I know there's a lot to cover in a little bit of time, but I appreciate you guys participating and really appreciate the opportunity this morning.